So today is July the 25th, and we're still in the same quarterly, but today we leave the book of Job, which was really awesome. Great story. And now we go to Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes, our lesson today comes out of chapter 1, verses 12 to 15, and chapter 2, verses 18 to 26. It's on page 73 in the study guide if you want to follow along, session 8. But if you look at Ecclesiastes 1:1, so here's the way the book starts. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So it's not really, aside from this first statement, it's not stated who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. And if you look at the first sentence, it gives you a pretty big clue. And so it is, I guess, pretty widely accepted. So the son of David, David had several sons, but the one who followed him and became king, y'all know who that was? Which one of his sons became king after David? That's correct. Very wise man, and God promised David. See, David wanted to build, God helped David build himself a really nice house, apparently. And David was very grateful for that. And so he said, you know what? I want to build a house for God because for all these years we have wandered, and God's house has been a tabernacle. It's a tent that as the Jews kind of moved around, God would tell them, okay, set up here for a while. And once they got established, they would stand up the tent, the tabernacle, and that's where they would worship. And God would be present in the tabernacle. And then when God would say, okay, time to go somewhere else, they would take it down. The Levites were in charge of, they each had different roles about who carried what or who took apart and put together. Anyway, so now that they get to the promised land and they've been established there for a while, and Saul was the king and then David said, you know what, God, you need a house. You need something that's befitting of who you are. So I'm going to build you a temple. Well, God, through a prophet, through one of his, I don't know if I can't remember if he was a prophet, one of his seers, told David, I don't want you to build me a house. And there were a couple of reasons. One of which was, David's whole kingdom, his whole life as king, even before he was king. Remember with Goliath, he killed Goliath, and then once David became king, he was at war for most of his life. And so God said, "You've shed a lot of blood, and so I'm going to let your son build me a house, but I will help you collect everything he needs." So before David made Solomon king, he collected gold and silver and timbers and stones so that everything was in place, so that when Solomon got old enough and he became a king, all he had to do was tell people to build the temple. And the other thing about Solomon was when he became the king, he asked God, he said, I don't want riches, because God asked him, God spoke to Solomon and he said, what do you want from me now that you're going to be the king? And Solomon said, I don't want riches. I don't want fame. What I want you to give me is wisdom, which should be all of our prayer. Remember, we've talked about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is what you learn, like in school or from a book or from your parents or mentors or coaches. You learn things that teach you how to do things, or maybe about through books. But the application of that, if you do it well and do it correctly, that's wisdom. So Solomon asked God, I want you to give me wisdom. And God was very happy with that request. And he said, you know what? Because you didn't ask for fame and riches, and you were smart and asked for my wisdom, I'm going to give you all of it. You're going to be the most wealthy king. You're going to be the most wise king. And so he blessed him. So if you think of that just by itself as an example for us, that if we, a lot of times when we pray, we pray for a lot of things, certainly help for, in our family situations or for ourselves, if there's a need, whether it be health or that test tomorrow or this job interview that I'm doing. Those are legitimate prayers because God says we can ask him for anything. And hopefully we ask If I ask for something, I say, God, here's what my request, but like Jesus said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. So, so hopefully we ask things in a wise manner, but you can ask for anything. Um, but God rewarded Solomon with wisdom because that's what he asked for. Um, so with that in mind, with this book, so there's who wrote it. But Solomon's accredited with 3 books: Proverbs, which is a collection of sayings, several chapters, but it's not like most of the books are stories. Proverbs is a series of statements that are little tidbits of wisdom. And then there's Ecclesiastes, which is near the end of Solomon's life, is what it appears as he looks back on what he's learned through his life, through his wisdom. And then there's Song of Solomon, which is, they say it's a love story. It talks about, part of it is written in from the person of a woman, it seems like, and then part of it from a man. But that's kind of a love story, Song of Solomon is. But so now with Ecclesiastes, here's what this one's about. And again, it starts. So this is the words of Solomon, the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And vanity, the word vanity is in here a lot. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. We'll come to that. I'll just tell you right now what vanity is translated to is futility. And as I said before, futility means in vain or useless. It's not for it's something that's done that's not for nothing comes of it. All right. So now to get to the lesson, I don't want to bog down already just in describing Solomon, because he was a very, very important figure historically, but also because of how God magnified him, if you will. So the introduction on page 73, it says, people throughout history, and this is why I was kind of talking to you, Jasmine, about your job, because we all, hopefully, as we get older, we should be motivated to want to do something. And a lot of times it takes parents or grandparents or maybe siblings to say, okay, you need to get out of the house and go do something. You can't just sit around the house all the time, even if it's doing sports. But as you get older, there's going to come a time when you got to have money to support yourself. And some people, especially in this day and time, are hesitant to want to go earn their own living and want to count on someone else or the government to take care of it. So anyway, it says, people throughout history have tried to take their wealth with them when they die. Items placed around mummies and in caskets point to that effort. The great equalizer in life is death, regardless of how much or how little one accumulates. So to that point, if you think about the pharaohs, the pyramids were tombs. And if you imagine that those pyramids, I've never been to Egypt and seen them, but you've seen pictures of them probably, and they're not small, right? The Great Pyramids are huge. And the purpose of that was for the Pharaoh, one person. Now, I think there were a lot of other people buried with them. There was a lot of other possessions, because what they believed was that the Pharaoh was divine. Remember that. And the other thing was that there was going to be an afterlife. And in the afterlife, he needed stuff, right? So they figured they would give him possessions, gold, silver, cats, servants. So they found in the pyramids all these things. Can you imagine if you were a servant of Pharaoh and Pharaoh died and they said, I'm sorry, Micah, but you've been a great butler for the Pharaoh, but in the afterlife, he's going to need you. So when we close up, the last thing before we close up this pyramid is we're going to put you in there with him so that he can have you in the afterlife. And you're like, but wait, what am I going to eat? Oh, don't worry about that, because he needs you in the afterlife. And Jasmine, you've been a great accountant or whatever it was that you were, but he's going to need you in the afterlife. So you need to go in there too, right? Um, there is an afterlife, but not in the way that they understood. They buried him with stuff because they said he's going to need it in the afterlife. There have been many people who uh, when they're buried. I mean, if you ever been to a funeral and seen someone in a casket, generally speaking, men are in a suit, women are in very nice clothes. There have been people who were buried in a car, or in their favorite car. There have been people that maybe people put, I don't know what, money in there with them or stuff like that. And the point of this introduction says, no matter what you've done through your life, a lot of people think that they want to strive and be successful. But you've heard the expression, you can't take it with you. Well, that's true. And that's kind of what Solomon's going to talk about here. In death, no matter how successful you are in your life, or how unsuccessful, how rich, how poor, if you just have a average life, no matter what it is, everyone is going to die. And like we learned about with Job, naked came I into the world, and naked I'm going to go out, meaning you're not going to be buried naked, but literally when you die, you can take nothing with you when you go, because your earthly body is gone. You get a new body when you go into the afterlife with God, and you can take nothing from this place with you. All right, so it says the great equalizer in life is death, regardless of how much or how little one accumulates. The writer of Ecclesiastes observed that people who focus solely on work and amassing material possessions come to the end of life without any eternal gains to show for it. So again, you should strive. You should want to be able to support yourself, support your family, but that should not be your obsession to accumulate, because the end of your life, none of that will be worth anything. Now, if you leave it to your kids, if you leave it to a endowment or to a charity, then your stuff can do something in furtherance of hopefully God, but you will not take anything with you. And it has a question: in what activities do people engage in their pursuit to find meaning in life? So what are things that people do to find meaning in life? And I put a couple things here, career or making money. That's a very common one for people that are motivated. They measure their success or their value by what their job is and how much money they make. Politics, a lot of people, if you think about the president of the United States, or of any country for that matter, to be the president of the United States, let's use that as an example, you really have to have, I would say, um, for the most part, you got to have an ego to want to be the president. I wouldn't want to be the president, because you talk about a stressful uh, job that has a whole lot of responsibility that one person cannot do by themselves, being president. But even at the whatever level of politics, people do it for lots of reasons. Some say, I want to go either at the local level or at the national level or at the presidential level. I want to change things. I want to get my views out there because I think what I know is smart, and are smart politicians. I would say that ones that are biblically based or use the Bible as their guide in life are probably going to make the best decisions. And there are a lot of people that would agree with that vehemently that are not believers. But anyway, so politics is one. And another one that I thought of is, if you think about athletes, especially professional athletes, that they get their meaning in life from their sport, and they get their fame from it. They get their money from it. So there are lots of things out there that people strive to do that are, it's good to want to be successful. I will say that right now, because you need to have motivation. But at the end of your life, and if all you did was made yourself the most famous athlete, Michael Jordan. Everybody here heard of Michael Jordan? Basketball player, right? Everybody knows his name. And he quit. He retired a long time ago. His legacy is very strong from basketball. Well, he don't play basketball anymore. He does other things, and he's a very rich man. Hopefully, he's living for God and using his money to further God's kingdom. Because if not, then it's it's all useless. And that's what this is saying. So let me get into I'm just going to scroll through chapter 1 up to verse 12. So again, vanity being futility. And so let's just walk through these. So he introduces himself, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So it's Solomon, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Everything is futile. Everything that people do in life is for nothing. What profit hath a man of all his labor, which he taketh under the sun? And the phrase under the sun means things you do on earth. Because when we live on earth, we live under the sun, right? So it's an earthly life. So what profit have you of man? What good is it of all the labor that you do in your life, that you do under the sun on earth? Because one generation passes away. So every person that lives is going to die, a couple of exceptions, Enoch and Elijah, but virtually everyone is going to die. And the next generation is going to come, and they're going to die, and the next generation is going to come, but the earth abideth forever, meaning the earth is not changing. People talk about climate change and all that right now, and there is change going on, but something to keep in mind is that man can probably harm the planet, but man will not destroy the planet. Jesus will when he comes back the second time, but man cannot. So for those climate change people, it's good to be concerned and want to be stewards of the earth. This is where we live. We don't want to pollute it. We don't want to make it worse for ourselves, but we will not destroy it. God will. All right. But anyway, but when it says the earth abideth forever, it will, and when God decides, it will stop abiding. The sun arises, the sun goes down. So days come and go. The wind goes toward the south, turneth toward the north. It whirleth continue, and the wind returneth again. So regardless of man, the earth is here. The sun's going to rise. It's going to set. The wind's going to blow. And regardless of man. Now, in verse 9, there's a phrase that's very common too. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. And this kind of goes to the cyclical nature of not only the earth, the sun rises and sets every day, it's a cycle. But the thing that has been, it shall be, that which is done shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun, because everything just kind of repeats itself. You think of the cycle of the earth. People make the same mistakes over and over and over again, no matter what generation it is. There's no new thing under the sun. And he says in verse 10, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It's already been already of old time, which is before us. There's no remembrance of former things. What he's saying is everything you do in your life, this is what he's leading up to. When you're gone, you may have a legacy. We have history books that talk about famous people, George Washington, our founding fathers. Like I said, Michael Jordan, he's still alive, but you're way too young to have actually seen him play basketball. You may have been old enough. I can't remember when he retired. And he was fantastic. I'll just tell you that. To me, he's the greatest basketball player that I've ever seen in my life. It's just amazing what he could do, which is kind of cool, but that means nothing when he dies. Right? He can't leave that to his kids. All right, now, so the verses for the lesson today, 12 through 15, that's the first set. So he said, so here's the subtitle, the futility of wisdom. So now, remember what Solomon was about. Now, he was very famous. He was rich. God blessed him with lots of things and also wisdom, which is what he asked for. But you see what he's saying here, the futility of wisdom. So that seems kind of odd. But so the first verses for the lesson 12 through 15, I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. So, and then he says, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. So let me put this in CSB, and we'll talk about it. So here's what he has found about wisdom. The limitations. So it was futility in the King James Version. Here it says the limitations of wisdom. And so what Solomon is saying that he has done, in verse 13, I applied my mind. So I have really put all of my heart and my effort. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. So he's already concluded that trying to figure out this earth and living on this earth is a miserable task because you'll never figure it out. Right? If you're trying to figure out what's the meaning of life with respect to just the earth, it's futile. You'll never figure it out, and it's going to make your existence miserable if that's what you're all about, is figuring out my purpose in life, my meaning in life with respect to just an earthly life. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, so living on the earth, remember that earthly life, and have found everything to be futile, vain, useless, a pursuit of the wind. When he talks about the wind, he says in our study guide at one point, how he asked the question, you know how the wind will blow to the north and to the south? You can't see it, you can feel it, you know it's there. If you could catch the wind, what would you have? I catch the wind, catch a puff of air. What do I have? I have nothing, right? Because it dissipates. I open my hands and it's gone. So he's kind of making the analogy of trying to use my wisdom to figure out the meaning of this life on earth. Even if I could do it, can you catch the wind? No. But even if I could, it's useless. I would have nothing. Right? And he says in verse 15 to close this section, what is crooked cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted. And what the study guide says is, let me see if I can find it, on page 76, it says the first part, which is what is crooked, the first part means that problems, what is crooked, cannot be solved. Now, there are certainly problems that can be solved. A math problem can be solved. If I have a problem in my life, I need a job because I need to make money to buy clothes and food and pay rent or pay a mortgage. That's a problem. That can be solved with my effort, right? But what this is saying is that the first part, crooked cannot be straightened, means that some problems can't be solved. The second part means that there is no end to a lack of information. So it says what is lacking cannot be counted. You can never get enough information to solve the problem of meaning in life. Intellectuals and the most educated should recognize the truth. So that's kind of what the first part is saying, is that, again, living your life, trying to figure out life is useless. So you need to, the picture is you need to devote your life to something else. And we're going to find it in a second set of verses what that is, according to Solomon. And hopefully you have an idea. Let me go now to, let's see, that was ended on 15. All right, let's see here. Solomon goes on in the rest of chapter 1 about what he has done. I commune in my own heart, saying, look, I've got a great estate. I have been very successful. I've got more wisdom than all that they have been before me in Jerusalem. And God told him, you'll be the most wise king ever. No king after you will be as wise as you. None before you was as wise as you. In verse 17, I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. So that's what he's saying. And it was useless. Now, for the next chapter, the futility of pleasure and possessions. All right, the verses for this one is 18 through 26. So let's scroll through this and get to there. Now he's talking about, as it says up here, pleasure and possessions. So this is not just wisdom and trying to figure out life. This is now, I'm going to, if you apply yourself to have a pleasurable life or to accumulate possessions, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. You should want to have certainly the necessities of life. And if you can make enough money or create things that you want, build, if you like landscaping, and you're going to go out there, I'm going to devote my week or my day or my life to making my yard the most pretty on the block or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, unless that's all your purpose is in your life. Okay. Instead of laughter, is it mad? And of mirth, what doeth it? So this is the pleasure and the possessions thing again. I made me great works. I builded me houses, planted me vineyards. So he has accumulated through his effort and through the effort of his people, slaves or servants or whoever it was, because he didn't plant big gardens and orchards and all that he says here. I made me pools of water. I've done all of these things. I got me servants and maidens, gathered me also silver and gold, the peculiar treasure of kings in the provinces, singers, musical instruments. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Okay, and whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not from my heart any joy. So he gave himself all the pleasures of life that he thought would fulfill him. Okay, but what he learned on verse 11, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, here's that word again, all was vanity. It was futile. It was useless. It was worthless. There was no profit under the sun. It gained me nothing past this earth. Okay. All right. He's learned that wisdom exceeds folly. It's better to be wise than foolish, for sure. Now, let's get to 18 through 26. Here's the futility of labor. It says, Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. So when you think about this in terms of when one day when you're a parent, if you have kids, and you get to the end of your life and you die, generally speaking, what happens to your stuff? It's passed on to your heirs, right? They inherit it from your parents or grandparents. There are people that maybe don't have kids who leave their stuff to a friend that they had or to a school board or whatever. So it's not just your parents that pass things on to you or that you can pass your things on to. But what this is talking about is now, as he's coming to the end of his life, all the stuff he's accumulated, what's going to happen to it when he leaves? Because it ain't going where he's going. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken in the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he, that heir, shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor, wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity or futility. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is wisdom, and in knowledge and in equity, yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This is also futile or vanity and a great evil. All right, so let me go back and put this in CSB and then walk you through what he's really saying here. I don't want to get too bogged down in his, because he's very repetitive in this for a reason. He has learned through his wisdom what is important. All right, on page 77 in the study guide, the subtitle of this says "Inheritance Blown?" with a question mark. So in the first part of it that we read, the teacher has deliberated on the failures of physical pleasures and luxuries to bring meaningful satisfaction in life. If that's all you're about, you're never going to have real meaning and satisfaction in your life. He revisited the futility of attempting to achieve immortality by accumulating human wisdom or accomplishing great feats. Being the best athlete, being the president of the United States, that's not going to make you immortal. And it's not going to, those great feats are going to mean nothing to you when you die. Your name will be in the history book. Jasmine was the president. She was she'll probably be about the 50th president, right? But after you die, what does that mean to you? Nothing. Okay. But it says, now he turned his attention to the question, what will happen to all my wealth and accomplishments when I die? In the preceding verses, he acknowledged that everyone will die, so we know that. But now he's looking at his heirs, and Solomon had a lot of children. Generally speaking, he would choose one who was going to follow him as his heir to be the king, and that one would get the most, but everyone would get something. But it says, this is what happens when one views work as a means of self-gratification. So if you're about accumulating stuff and it's going to make you feel fulfilled, for such individuals, their work literally ends up at a dead end when you die. One of Solomon's Proverbs, and this is a good one, Proverbs 16:3 states, and here's kind of the meaning of today's lesson: commit your activities to the Lord, and your plans will be established. So there's kind of the punchline of this whole lesson, is that everything we do, there's a song that says, it's kind of an old song, but the title of it is, I Want My Life to Count for Jesus. And if everything that you do, and it doesn't have to be, all right, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to be a pilot to glorify Jesus. Okay, that's not why I became a pilot. It was a job, and I enjoy it, but I didn't get that job to glorify Jesus. I'm going to sing in front of the church to glorify Jesus. That's a good reason. But if everything that we do ultimately is for the purpose of glorifying Him, so I work to earn a living so I can support myself and my family, but I also have an obligation to tithe, right? So when I earn that paycheck, hopefully the first bit of money that comes out of that goes to the church. And then with what's left, I pay my taxes. So that's the next obligation because the government's going to get theirs. And then I have bills, necessities, mortgage. We have to have groceries. We need clothes, fuel, gas for your car. And then what's left after all your bills are paid and your taxes are paid, and hopefully you've paid the Lord, giving Him back a portion, because where does all we have come from? God gives us all of it. What's left after all those debts are paid, or obligations, I should say, is what's called discretionary income. Right? That's what's left. And discretion means I decide what happens with that. At my discretion, I'm going to decide what to spend this money on. Hopefully you have some. Now, what do I do with that? Well, maybe I gave my tithe to the church. There's this thing that I want to give to. I want to fund an episode of The Chosen, this TV show that they're asking the public to fund it. Or there's a pregnancy crisis center over on 191 that I'd like to give money to, or I want to give some to Billy Graham, or I want to give some to the Gideons, or whatever. I think God would be pleased with that. You know what? I think it's been a while since I've had a new car, so I want to get a new car. Well, that's your prerogative too. That's the discretionary part of your income. But for those who don't have that, so back to this proverb, commit your activities to the Lord. Everything that you do, if you try to glorify the Lord in it, your plans will be established. And it says the Hebrew word translated activities. So commit your activities to the Lord. The Hebrew word for activities refers to all the various things people set out to accomplish in life, including their work. So it says if you will commit your activities, your endeavors, what you strive for in life to the Lord, your plans will be established. And it says the translation of the word established means to be made stable, durable, and lasting. So it says the promise of this proverb stands in stark contrast to what happens to those who live and work for themselves instead of for the Lord. Their accomplishments are temporary and ultimately meaningless. When people commit their activities to the Lord, not only do they honor Him, but they store up for themselves eternal treasures in heaven. And that's from Matthew. The promise that Jesus said was, if you live your life for me, if you live your life for God, the things that you do for God, those are the eternal things that are being stored up for your life in heaven. Now it says, to make matters worse, the teacher, so back to Solomon, considered who might inherit everything he had accumulated. It occurred to him that all his hard work and all that he attained would come to nothing. So that's a decision that parents or whoever's going to bequeath their stuff to someone, there of course have been parents who looked at their kids and said, boy, my children have been such a disappointment to me. And I've worked hard my whole life. If I give what I have earned to my kids who have no work ethic, or they have, maybe they have a drug problem, or who knows what, they've been a thief their whole life. If I give them everything I've worked for, in all likelihood, very quickly, they're going to run through that money because they have no discipline, or they have no self-discipline, or whatever. They have a drug addiction, or whatever it is. That might be gone. And that might influence a parent's decision whether to give that. So Solomon, even back then, he says, okay, everything and Solomon had a lot. Wow, if I give this to my heirs, what are they going to do with it? Well, his point is, because he can't take it with him, something's going to happen to it. And he can't, once you're dead, you can't control it. You could have the best son, best grandson, best daughter, best granddaughter, best friend that you leave your stuff to. But once you give it to them, it's theirs. You can't control it. And so, again, what it's going to is, I can't control it after I leave, even if that person is going to blow it. Okay? Let's see what I've got highlighted here when we get to the end of this. All right, so that's verse 19. Who knows whether whoever's going to inherit it, will be wise or a fool, yet he will take over all my work that I labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. I have no control over it. It's useless. There is no eternal value to it. So I began. So this is the the fruit of his labor, of his wisdom, of trying to come up with the meaning of life. So I began to give myself over to despair concerning all my work that had labored under the sun. If you dwell on this, of how temporal your life is on the earth, and at the end, it's going to count for nothing, you could despair. And he did. I began to give myself over to despair. When there is a person whose work was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and he must give his portion to a person who has not worked for it, this too is futile and a great wrong. For what does a person get with all his work and all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? For all his days are filled with grief, and his occupation is sorrowful even at night. His mind does not rest. This too is futile. Again, if you focus on this earth, that's what you're all about, is this life, you're not going to rest very well. Now, some would argue that Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey, the Twitter guy, they sleep very well at night because they are loaded with money. And maybe they do. Maybe they have no desire for, surely there's more in life. And there are some people who their goal is they've got so much money that they are investing in trying to figure out how to make themselves immortal, that they would never die, that a medicine is invented, or some kind of a thing that will keep them alive forever. They think that there's a technology maybe that just hasn't been developed, or an injection, or whatever it is, who knows. Or maybe, and there have been people, I think Walt Disney maybe, there have been people that when they died, they said, when I die, I want you to put my body in a freezer. I don't want to be buried, because you know what happens when you're buried. The Bible says ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right? We came from dust. God formed us out of the dust of the earth, out of the clay, breathed life into us. When we die, we decompose, right? You all learned what happens to human or carbon-based organisms, whether it be plants or animals or human beings. When you die, you deteriorate. If you're frozen, you don't deteriorate. Think about that hot dog in the freezer. It could be there for the end of time. It's going to be a hot dog when it thaws out. Now, once it thaws out, it's going to deteriorate. Some people, and I think Walt Disney was one, that freeze me until there comes that time when that technology or that magic thing comes along that will allow us to live forever. And then maybe my body, you can then thaw me out once you've got that technology ready, thaw me out, and then revive me. And then I'll live forever. Okay? Well, I got bad news for Walt. That ain't how it works, right? We will not live forever. So there that is. For all his days are filled with grief, his occupation is sorrowful, even at night. If that's what you're living for, and the point of that was, those rich guys, they may sleep perfectly well at night. The point of this is, when you take that last breath, then your eyes truly are going to be open, and one or two places you go. All right. Finish this up, verse 26. For to the person who is pleasing in his sight, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, so now we're talking about God, but to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile and the pursuit of the wind. So what this is trying to say, on page 80 of the study guide, there's a question that says, what are the dangers of basing our worth solely on the job or type of work we do? And there's a saying that I heard a long time ago, and it says, if you like your job or if you enjoy your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Now, that being said, it's just like my first job, I washed dishes at a restaurant. And after a while, I got promoted, I guess, if you will, to be a cook, right? And that's just sort of progression. You hope that in whatever you choose, you progress. Well, very few people want to go be a dishwasher in a restaurant for the rest of their life. I was young. I needed a job so I could afford gas for my car, so I could try to afford a pair of tennis shoes or whatever, because my parents provided for us, but it certainly wasn't extravagant. If you wanted the extra things, you had to earn them for yourself, which is a very good lesson. But being a dishwasher or a cook in a restaurant was not my life ambition. Now, there are people that they're happy to do that, and that's great if they can make enough money to support themselves. I will never knock a profession, anybody that's working. But so what we should strive to do, this is what I wrote down into that question, the dangers of basing our worth solely on our job of type of work we do. You should want to earn a living so that you can support yourself and your family if you have one. That should be your minimum goal, is I need to be able to support myself and then my family. And then I said, if you like your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Meaning, if you can find that job that you really enjoy. So if you can decide early in life, I would love to be a pharmacist, or I'd love to be a pilot, or I want to be the president, or I want to be a truck driver. That interests me. Whatever it is that you do, try to be the best at it. And then don't let your job define you. That job is a means to an end. It's to make money to support yourself, to pay a tithe, hopefully, and then make enough to where you've got discretionary income after your obligations. Remember that you can do things for yourself or maybe extra for God. But I would say that tithe is the minimum that you should strive for. And if you decide when you're doing that job, okay, this was kind of fun when I started it, but I don't really like it. And the millennial generation now, they're very active in their careers. People will work for a while and they go, I've had enough of this. I want to move up to something else. And if there's a job market, that's great. My generation is more of, okay, I want to start in something. I want to be good at it. I want to progress in that until I get to the top of it. And then, when I retire and I'm finished. So either way you look at it, it's fine. But so if you start doing something, you decide, yeah, it's kind of fun. I can do it for the rest of my life. That's great. If not, there's nothing wrong in trying something else, but do something. But that's not the dangers of basing our worth solely on the job or type of work we do. Is again, at the end of that, if that's what you were all about, it was for nothing. It was you. I want to finish by reading what I highlighted at the end of this. It says, the ability to work and enjoy its fruit are gifts from God. Remember, all we have is given from God. And that's why we give a portion of it back in our tithe. However, they are neither a means to nor the attainment of lasting value. It is not the gifts, but the giver who gives them significance. Speaking of God, the teacher Solomon asked, who can enjoy life apart from him? Okay? And that's in verse 25. Who can enjoy life apart from God? And the answer is no one. Again, Jeff Bezos may enjoy his life. He went to space. He shot himself in his own rocket up to space last week. Went up there, had like an 11-minute ride. Him and his brother and some kid and some guy who wanted to be an astronaut when he was younger, did all the training and just didn't get to go into space. 4 of them shot off in this rocket and then touched the edge of space and came back down. So in his mind, he might be really enjoying his life. God may not be in his life. I don't know. Jeff Bezos, I don't know his heart. And so when Solomon says, who can enjoy life apart from him? You're not truly fulfilled if you're living a life separate from God. And again, after this life, it's going to be really important that you live a life together with God versus not apart from Him. Okay. Did me and Solomon beat that dead horse enough? Did you get it? Your purpose in life, hopefully, is to be in communion with God, to work, be one with God, to things that you do should be pleasing to God. You should think about God, seek to please God, even though you can live your life separately. I mean, it's not totally focused on God all the time, but your purpose in life in the long run should be pleasing to Him. All right. The first one did. First one did. Were you sleeping in my class, honey? I guess I'm just used to it. Okay. I didn't do it today, but it's been a while. But